blend if function that we worked on in class today. And this is that sample file that we worked on. So blend if is simply a way to blend two layers together. And I have two layers here. I have a spoke light effect. That's what these little dots are. They're like spokes. And I have this rather dignified looking cat. So if I come up here, I'm not going to click on the, you can see this is a smart object. I'm going to click over here in this blank area. And that's the shortcut to get me to the layer styles. Now, we've talked about all of these various layer styles and what they can do, but we're going to stay in here for now when we talk about blend if. And for now, we'll set it to gray. Now, these two sliders, this one represents the current layer. So this slider represents all of the information on the spoke light effect layer. And this slider represents the underlying layer, which in this case is the cat layer. So these are the darks, these are the lights, these are the midtones. If I start to pull the darks towards the midtone, you can see the darkest parts of the image begin to disappear. We're blending them if they are the darkest part. That's what this means. If I put my finger on the Option key, Option for a Mac, Command for a PC, and I start to move the slider even further, what's happening is now the selection that I'm creating is feathering. And you can see, if I bring this back, you can kind of see this is a very ham-fisted sort of mask that's being created here. But if I use the Option key and I pull the two sliders apart, you can see, and I can play with this. How much of this haze do I want? Do I want it to sort of move around? And I hit OK. And now, if I want this sort of spoke effect to not cover the cat, I can add a blend mode. Sorry, I can add a layer mask. And then I can come in with my, come in with my brush. I'm going to make the brush a little bigger. Yeah. And then I'm going to make it kind of soft edged. Make it a decent size. And as I come in, you can see I can paint it out. I can change my opacity. This is what I was talking about in class when I said, now you can start working with more than one tool at the same time. So I can hit the X key and swap back and forth between black and white. I can kind of soften that up. I'm moving very quickly, but so as you can see, I've combined these two layers using the blend if effect. And if you look at my two layers, the blend if effect has added this little icon. This tells me which layer I have the blend if effect on in my file. Now, if I throw this away and I go back to where I was, if I double click here, I'm going to reset my blend if effect. Let's see what happens if I use the underlying layer instead of the current layer. The underlying layer, remember, is the cat. So if I grab the underlying layer and I pull, I start to get this kind of double exposure effect where the underlying layer is the one that's being masked off. The darkest parts of the cat are what are being masked off. And again, if I put my finger on the Option key, that extremely rough-edged selection begins to soften up. Now, the other thing I'll point out here in these blend if, the blend mode is here. Now, this is the same blend mode that's up here on the layers, but if I decided that I wanted to see what the different effects look like, I can just run my mouse through them. And the thing is, I can't tell you for certain which of these to use in which instance. It's going to depend on the kind of images that you're working with. You know, how dark they are, how light they are, how colorful they are. But as I mentioned in class, I just really encourage you to do a little playing, to do a little messing around. And then now that I have this, assuming that this is the double exposure that I want, I can do something even on top of that. I can go into my adjustment layers, for example. I can grab my hue and saturation, add that layer, come into my properties, which are attached to my hue and saturation, and I can change the color of this, both the spoke light effect and the cat. Now, if I only want this adjustment layer to deal with the spoke light effect, just like we learned, if I put my finger on the option key, I get my clip mode. So you can see now this hue and saturation layer is only changing the spoke light effect and not the cat. I can change that around and pull this down. Now hue and saturation is affecting the cat and not the spoke light layer. And if I want them both, I can pull the spoke light layer down. Now this hue and saturation is affecting both of these layers together. So that's just kind of a flying introduction review of what we did in class today using BlendIF. You can create some pretty interesting effects with it, and I think it's worth exploring and seeing what it does with what you're working on. Okay.